It's now time for our main event with your host, Chris Tetrold Blaine. Welcome to Once Upon a Turnbuckle.
Welcome to another episode of Once Upon a Turnbuckle, and carrying on the sort of Pride of British Wrestling theme that I've had for the last sort of week or so, starting last week with my amazing interview with Marty Jones. I get to welcome one of the stars of today, and a guy who not only is a British wrestler, he's also a fellow Devonian. So equally, exciting to welcome him for that. But he's gone from the green fields of Devon to the hallowed halls of WWE and NXT and back again. So I'm so glad that he's here, sparing a bit of time to talk to us today. Formerly known as Oliver Gray in NXT, I welcome Joel Redman. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you? Whereabouts in Devon are you from?
I'm Newton Abbott.
Oh, are you really?
Okay. Yeah, so not, I believe Exeter was where you grew up. Or...
No, I was born in Tiverton, but my parents have got a farm near, Credison, like Devon. Yeah, right out in the sticks. So that's where I grew up.
Very cool. Yeah, I knew it well. I've had a couple of jobs. I've worked around Exeter a lot of the time that I've been down there. I've lived down there for about 21 years. No, 16 years, but I've been traveling down there for 21 years. So I'm traveling around sort of Creditor, Oakhampton, Exeter. Know it well.
Yeah, it's a nice part of the country. I do miss living down there a lot.
Whereabouts are you now?
Salisbury.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so still not that far away, but
no. I'm originally from Basingstoke, so Salisbury again, not too far from sort of my neck of the woods up there. But
do you ever get down to the Reach wrestling shows in Plymouth? You ever been down to?
I don't. No, I tell you, I've in my lifetime, which is really odd for a lifetime wrestling fan and now a podcaster, is I've only been to 3 wrestling shows in my entire life. 2 of them have been down here. Actually, funnily enough, you are the first guest that I've actually seen live, which is just as special. So I saw you in that was Exeter Corn Exchange for Global Force when it was over Jeff Jarrett. You headlined, I think, that night with Nick Aldis for the GFW title, if I remember.
Yeah, rightly. I remember that.
But
5 years ago.
That's about that. Yeah, 2016. Yeah, it's a memorable day because I was a writer as well at the time, and I was doing the last tweaks on my second book that day, lingering around Exeter in Exeter Library, waiting for the show to start. So it's definitely stuck in my mind. But no, I mean, the only other shows I've been to was Pro Wrestling Pride that were down there as well. I saw one of their shows in Paynton. But apart from that, no, WWE was the only other one I've been to years and years ago. But no, I sort of mixed when NXT came down to Plymouth. I missed it pretty much, which was bad form. So thank you again for coming along. I'm really interested, sort of to begin with. Let's sort of take it right back to the beginning. Is how did you discover wrestling? Were you a fan before you got into the ring, or wanted to get into the ring?
No, not particularly. We didn't have like Sky and stuff when I was a kid, so I didn't watch wrestling as a kid. I just did a lot of judo and played a lot of rugby, and then some friends of mine were wrestlers. They were wrestling fans, so they kind of got me into wrestling that way. Okay. So I started just wrestling on some hay bales in a friend's barn, and then it progressed into getting into a ring. But
cool. So there wasn't anyone in particular that sort of you saw on the screen or live or anything that sort of pulled you in and wanted, or was there along the way, was there someone in particular that really inspired you in the beginning?
When I started wrestling, it was Chris Benoit was like who stood out to me really as my favourite. Like it was the guy that I really enjoyed watching. But I think that's probably from the judo background and stuff. It was coming from that sort of legit stuff to watch him. It looked real whenever he wrestled, so that really appealed to me. So people like him and Fit Finlay and those kind of guys really
cool
were the guys I really liked. Kurt Angle as well. Kurt Angle fan.
So the real, what we consider like the real wrestlers. I mean, it's kind of, I don't keep up with the current product an awful lot, but it does seem to have kind of circled back. When I was talking to Marty Jones, he agreed on this as well. But it's a lot of like the old school type sort of flavor to it is returning, to wrestling. There does seem to be more of an onus on the actual athleticism, the scientific side of things. So when you started, so just talk us through when you first started to get into wrestling training and that sort of how did you go about that? Where did you get to go to start off?
So there was meant to be a school in Exeter, run by a company called Revolution British Wrestling, and then they sort of pulled out last minute. And so there wasn't going to be a school. I think I was 15 or something at the time, or 16. I said, well, I will sort of run it, and we just sort of pay wrestlers to come down and train us at the Leisure Centre on the mats. So I met a lot of wrestlers that way, like Andy Simmons and Sammy Ray. And then I met Phil Powers. When I met Phil Powers, he said to come along on the holiday camp circuit. So I started doing that when I was 16 or something, sort of refereeing and helping out, put the ring up. And they showed me stuff before the shows. So I kind of went out on the road straight away and learned little bits that they'd show me before we got in the ring, which was really good.
Yeah.
And then I met the UK kid there too, who was trained by Shawn Michaels, and then he sort of taught me for the start of my wrestling journey.
Okay, that's cool. I was a massive Shawn Michaels fan, so sort of any kind of lineage down from that is amazing for me. So
He was, UK kid was a really good trainer because he'd just come back from Shawn Michaels school in Texas, so he knew the way he was teaching us was the way they were teaching them out there, so it was perfect. Just really good fundamentals, and it was a really good trainer.
Cool. So talk about some of the promotions that you started off with. Around Devon, because I know, it seems to be, or it seemed to be a few years ago, still a hotbed for, there was quite a few promotions around down here. I know a couple of them have sort of, fallen by the wayside now, unfortunately. But back then when you were starting, was there a rich kind of circuit for wrestling down in the Southwest?
No, there was no wrestling at all. We would then drive. So I did that school for a little bit, and then UK Kid opened his own school. So we would drive from Devon to Portsmouth on a Saturday, train for 3 hours, and then drive back again. And it's a lot of miles to do on your car. And there was one lad who came from Penzance. You get a train from Penzance to Exeter, and then you get in the car from Exeter to Portsmouth. Which is a lot to do in a day. Yeah. But it wasn't like now. There's schools everywhere. Back then there wasn't. There was a handful of schools. So you had to travel to learn how to wrestle, which is probably a good thing because it just gets the best ones, and the time wasters don't really get involved. So that was a good way of getting into it. Yeah. There was no wrestling at all in the Southwest. I started wrestling for his UK Kids company, which is Varsity Pro Wrestling. Right. Did some shows for them. Like I say, I worked the holiday camps at that time with Phil Powers, and then did the odd job for All Star Wrestling, but it was Minehead Butlins, and I'd be pulled in last minute, and it was just it wasn't like it is now for me, but it was just the odd job here and there. Yeah. And then I started working for the FWA Academy, which is where I met Mark Sloan, who then trained me. He was the next trainer that I had, and from there, that's when I worked for IPW and Pro Wrestling Noah and all these kind of companies, and started to get out more on the scene.
Did you have a feel for what you wanted your persona to be? Did you have a character in mind, or was it always just really based around yourself? Because from what I've seen of you, it is quite a genuine sort of,
Yeah, I've never had, that's my biggest weakness as a wrestler, and I just really struggle with that side of the business. I don't think it interests me a lot, which is not an excuse because everyone should be he's trying to be good at every field of it. But, I've always sort of struggled a little bit with that sort of over the top characters. I'm not an over the top person, I'm a quiet person. I'm quite a shy person. I'm a farm boy from Devon. So, I can't go out there screaming and shouting. It just doesn't feel very natural to me.
No, but then, probably wasn't something that you wanted to crack out like a Hillbilly Jim sort of character. It wouldn't have really worked.
Yeah, well, I thought about it once. I tried it like a lumberjack character for a while, but I'm clean shaven, fell on its arse. But it never really worked for me. But then sometimes, when I work as a good guy for a lot of these companies, I think if you're too over the top, the audience can see through that. If you're begging for their applause too much, it's a little bit. Yeah. It puts you off wanting to cheer for someone. Whereas if someone's more genuine in the ring, and you can just be a little smile to someone in the crowd or a little thumbs up or something, that can normally get more emotion out of people than shouting at them, come on. Yeah. Because, it's sort of forcing a reaction that isn't going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very much, there's a lot of characters, a lot of gimmicks that have really, taken off and everything, but I'm very much, it's going to sound odd coming from an 80s, 90s fan, but you could, like you say, you could see through some of these things where it is being forced down your throat on there. I think 1995, I banged on about before. If you look at the product that WWF had and the gimmicks that they were just churning out over then in 96, it was just, face palming. It was just why they wandered so far from that. But then back in the 80s, you had massive characters up there, that everyone looked up to. Top of my head, Hillbilly Jim, they were still cranking out these kind of everyday sort of characters, but it was a bit hit and miss, wasn't it, whether the fans actually bought it or not?
It was probably affected by whatever was happening in the sort of modern culture at the time.
Exactly.
Like, I think maybe Hogan and people and Warrior all took off because you look at films of that era, it's kind of they were all larger than life characters. That's the 80s sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Whereas I think maybe nowadays that doesn't work quite as well. But I think wrestling's changed a lot anyway. Once people realised that wrestling, was a work and that it wasn't that legit, then I think everything had to change. Really, you had to start increasing the athleticism and working a way around it, where people still want to watch this sort of show, and they don't care if it's real or not because it's a show.
Yeah, I very much loved. Back in the mid to late 90s, WCW, I was a WWF fan growing up, so I hated the fact that I was starting to enjoy WCW around about that time, but they had the cruiserweights, which was the one thing that really pulled me in every week, because it wasn't bogged down in storylines, but what these guys could do was so different, and had people like Owen Hart before, I suppose, in WWF, but he didn't really have a lot of people to bounce off with that. All of a sudden, a whole division, and it's just, I don't know, opened the doors, I suppose, for...
I always think people like you said before, Shawn Michaels and especially about Bret Hart and stuff, where like it's not like over the top moves that you might see in some of the cruiserweight matches, but it just tells such good stories when they wrestle.
Yeah,
and it's so easy to watch because you can really get engaged in what's happening. You want someone to win, and they're like the best wrestlers when you watch those guys, because they're not throwing away flips, but they're just telling really good stories and really good emotion and selling, and they're just like the masters.
I think they're the ones that keep it truer to what I've always argued is the best thing about wrestling. It's like, okay, fine, as you get older you do realize that certain things are predetermined and decided and whatever, but it doesn't alter what goes on in the ring. And if it's entertaining and it's rooted in that as close as you can as the sport element of it, makes it more legit. I mean, these storylines and these plots and whatever that go completely off the field. That's why it's so easy for some people to turn around and say it's, wrestling is just dire, and it's just fake.
But we do the same thing with films, right? Like, film's exactly the same thing. The film isn't real, but if it's got a good story to it, then it's a great film. But when they take it too far in some of these like CGI films, you go, oh God, that was just too much, or it puts you off.
It does. I mean, you don't go into a film thinking that that is really happening. It's just you can suspend your disbelief for a couple of hours.
You don't go to the theatre and think it's real.
No,
it's a theatre. It's a show. It's like you should. Wrestling's exactly the same. It's just theatre. Like, it is. Why people would get upset that it's not real? But I get that from people now when they say, "What do you do?" So I'm a wrestler. Oh, it's all fake. And you go, yeah, it's a show. Like, I don't. Yeah, it's not an insult. I don't understand why.
No, but what you do, that's not CGI in the ring. What you do, you are actually
of course,
doing. So there's no stunt man.
Yeah, you're still getting hurt.
Yeah,
I can list off tons of injuries for him. And so and I played rugby a lot. When I was younger, and wrestling's much harder for me on my body than rugby was. At least in rugby, I wasn't trying to get hit. I was trying to avoid getting tackled. It was wrestling. I'm kind of letting myself get tackled all the time. It's a different thing.
Sticking with just sort of before we kind of move on to the next subject, the character thing. I've looked at a few of your matches sort of floating around the internet and whatever, and one grabbed me actually. It's credited as being your last one. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. We will come back to the beginning of your NXT run, but it was credited as being your last match there for against Mojo Rawley, and you had come back, I think, from your year or so off, whatever it was, and you came back and you looked like a heel, whereas you had been sort of fan favorite before, and you reminded me so much of Lord Steven Regal, that character. You had that kind of almost like nose in the air disdain kind of thing, and I quite enjoyed it. It wasn't what I was expecting from you. Did you have any influence from people like Steven Regal back then?
Yeah, I think every British wrestler does when you go there, because he's the guy that you watch, who's been there already and done it. I mean, I probably copied him too much in those ones, but I was just clutching at straws to see what I could come up with, because they weren't, they didn't have any plans for me. You got to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And,
I
was like, when I come back from my injury, it was all kind of like, go. We're going to get you rolling, get you back up there again. And then it just didn't happen for whatever reason. That's obviously with the office. I got no idea why they didn't want to do anything. But, I just tried different ideas. At the time with the promos, I was a villain with Danny Burch. Me and him were like a tag team heels. So like we just had these sort of heel characters. And I thought, well, I'll just run with that, I guess, and did that on TV. But I knew my job. Like, I don't remember that match at all, but I remember it just being an enhancement match for him. You just got to go out there and just do what you can to try and get him over, because they have plans for him.
So winding it back then. So obviously you were sort of going through the independent scene over here. When do you remember when you got the call to say that that WWE were interested and they wanted you to go over there, and where did that journey start?
I was in Nottingham doing like a training thing. So I had a wrestling school in Devon, in Exeter, called Devon Wrestling Association. So I took some boys up to like a big group training thing with FWA in Nottingham. And Drew McDonald was there, who was a talent scout for WWE. Right. And he just said, they've been trying to get hold of you, and can you send your details, go on this website? But, you haven't got to apply. Like, they want to see you at the next tryout. So that's where he told me. And then, then from there, I just put my details into the website and went along to the next tryout, which was in Manchester. I can't remember what year. It would have been 2011, maybe. So.
I think it was 2012 when you started with them. So, yeah.
I was
Yeah. But so you went over to, you did a stint in Florida Championship Wrestling, which I think is like the natural kind of, it was like the starting place for a lot of the stars that go through. And then so you went up to the main NXT roster. So any early memories? Because I think NXT has become a beast of its own now. Really, I mean, you could consider it a completely separate promotion. What was it like back then in the early days?
So FCW was. So I was there when they'd moved. So it was like, when I got signed, there was no NXT. It was like a TV program they did maybe, but it wasn't a company yet. It was FCW. So when I went there was maybe 25 people, 30 people at the most under contract. And it's like a sweatbox of a warehouse. Like, it's no air conditioning. It's just these two rings. And if they're feeling generous, they might open the shutters for you. But Florida in the summer is stupidly hot. So like, it's a hard place to train. And then whilst I was there, it moved to Orlando, to the Performance Center, and NXT started its own sort of brand. So I was there during that transition phase. And then when we went to the Performance Center, there was like 100+ people there. It was much, much bigger amount of people that were signed to contracts, which is good. It's good to be in a Performance Center, but then you're still trying to get out of there, actually trying to get up to the main road. And, you go from like 1 in 30 to 1 in 100 is difficult then to stand out. But there's a lot. If you look at some of the talent that I was lucky enough to be there with at the time, just to be around them and be able to work a lot of those guys and wrestle them and learn from them. So it was a good time to be there.
Yeah, and you've got the credit as being one half of the first ever NXT Tag Team Champions with Adrian Neville. And I mean, again, how far they did it in tournament fashion, obviously, because there were no champions before that. At what point was it decided that you guys were going to go over and win the belts, or was that the plan throughout?
Definitely, I don't think it was the plan throughout, because we weren't meant to be in a tournament. I think the Ascension were meant to win it, and then one of the Tom Latimer, the Ascension, got released, so they kind of needed another team. And I think with Pac, they just wanted to get him on TV as much as they could, because he's just an incredible wrestler. And I'm lucky that I was the other English guy that was a babyface. So they threw us together as a team, and then it just seemed to work. We had a bit of chemistry together, and maybe we were meant to win it from the start. I don't think that was the plan. I would have thought they wanted the Wyatt family to win originally, maybe, but he ended up getting to the final, and they changed their mind, and we won it. But I mean, they may have planned for us to win it all along. I can't imagine they would have. But.
It's a great sort of, they used to call it like a Cinderella story when like 1, 2, 3 Kid and Bob Holly won for that, won the titles for that one day back in '95. It's that surprise element, which, if you, particularly as you got to the final against the Wyatt family, so many of the fans were probably expecting them to win, like say, and then it just probably, it gives the fans that extra reason to tune in again if it's not predictable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It was good, and it was a good reaction. Yeah, in Full Sail, like the crowd pretty hot for it and stuff. So I mean, it got over well. And, yeah, it was really good. I mean, it's a bit of a blur now, because it's a long time ago and you don't remember it. But I mean, it's nice to think you're the first ever. I guess that's quite.
That's cool.
No matter what, that's in the books, isn't it? Really, so that's quite.
That's it. And again, I haven't ever really watched a lot of NXT. Sort of, because I've fallen out of it, probably, way before that. But I've caught up on snippets and everything, and some of the teams, particularly, I think in the early days, from fans that I spoke to, that the tag team division in NXT was like one of the most respected in the industry. And to know that your name, like you say, is down on the list of, at the beginning of the list of the stars that have worn those belts. Did I see as well that? Did I see as well? It was Dusty Rhodes that presented you guys with them at the end. You remember?
Yeah.
That's a cool touch. That's a cool. Did you get to like spend any time around him, or was he literally just there for that one? Yeah,
he did our promo class. He was like one of our coaches, so we do promos with him every week. So he was always there. Yeah, he was always there.
That's amazing.
So spent a lot of time with him. But the coaches there were insane. Like my first coach for the first 6 months or a year was Ricky Steamboat. Like, to be taught by Ricky Steamboat for that long is pretty cool. Like, wow. It's unbelievable the opportunities that you get from being there, really.
Yeah. So you kind of go into fanboy mode when you sort of see yourself amongst guys like that and knowing that you've got that opportunity to work that closely with them, or does it just go to the back of your head?
You try not to, you try and be professional. So I mean, if you just try and, you don't want to have that sort of attitude, but there are definitely times when it's quite surreal. Met The Rock a few times and stuff. Like, meeting The Rock's pretty cool. Like, you don't think you're going to meet him, but I guess that kind of makes you stutter a bit. And I met Vince a couple of times and things, like, it's quite big.
Okay, what was he like in person? Because again, you one version.
Yeah, I didn't speak to him much. It was just a hello and a couple of handshakes. It wasn't an in-depth conversation, but yeah, he seemed all right. The Rock had just a presence about him. I think me and Pat were in Arizona for the Rumble, and we're like in the main arena bit. We're quite far up the bleacher seats. You just know there's someone in the entranceway. You know, looking, and it's him. He's just got that presence about him. I guess that's what the big stars have got. They've got that way of just connecting with people without even having to see them. You just know they're there.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier on that you've got like a string of injuries that you can, list out to people who want to argue that this isn't real. Unfortunately, one of them sort of was quite crucial to, I guess, your time probably ending there a little bit more prematurely than you think, or at least your title run probably. You was it a torn ACL, I believe, that you yeah. Did that occur in the ring, or was that something that happened outside?
That was in the ring. That was on a house show with Bray Wyatt. We went for a slam on me. I went to land behind him and just tore my knee.
Right.
But it's just what it is, but just the timing was really bad. Like, we just won the belts, and we'd had a phone call about going up to the main road and stuff. So like, it was we were weeks away from going up and debuting, and then you say you need. But that is what it is, And at the time it got me pretty miserable. But when you look back at it, you just go, well, I couldn't do anything about it, No.
That's
just one of those freak accidents.
That's when the belts were dropped to the Wyatt family, I believe. Was it Bo Dallas took your place?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you know, were the titles meant to go over to them because the plan, like at that point, because the plan was for you to move on, or was that a reaction to the fact that you were out?
I got no idea. All I know is that we had the phone call just saying, sort of, what's your tracksuit size for going up to the road, sort of things. Like, and they were getting them printed for us, and then. So I imagine we were going to drop them and go on up to the main roster, but I wouldn't have a clue.
No. So what happened then? Obviously, you were out, I believe, for about a year. or so. You know, were you still over there, or did you come back to the UK sort of during that time and sort of bide your time?
I was over there. And you can't leave because you're kind of getting rehabbed out there, and they're paying for all that stuff. And that was a difficult time for me. But my son had been born in England, and he was about 4 months old or something.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to get back and see him because I couldn't wrestle. I couldn't really do anything. I'm just sort of sitting there watching training and doing these exercises that I thought I could probably do those in England.
Yeah.
But you know, it's fair enough for them. Like, they need to keep you there because they want to make sure you're rehabbing properly. So I said to stay there, and that played on my mind a bit. You know, it's all right when you're wrestling if your kid's a long way away, because you go, well, I'm making money and I'm setting up the future here. But if you're not really doing anything, you think, what am I doing here? You know, I'm sort of wasting seeing him just stuck in America.
Yeah. So when you finally went back, again, I got it written down here. I think it was the 10th of April 2014, you returned to NXT. And then only about 3 weeks later came the announcement that you had been released. Again, do you have any thoughts or knowledge on what the thought was behind that? Why they let you go? Was it the injury or just?
I got no idea. I don't know. I know the day before. I think the coaches know a day before or something. And Robbie Brookside's one of the coaches there. And like the day before, he just had me get in the ring and he just keep firing people into me, and I just sort of out wrestle them on the floor and just sort of tie them up in some knots. And then he gets another one of their top lads in. I do the same thing. And I think that was like his little way of just trying to give me a last ditch effort to try and get them to see something, but their mind was made up. Yeah, who knows what it is? You know, it could be anything. I could have just annoyed someone, you know, who makes a coffee. I don't know what it is. Like you can't tell. Like it's so
not knowing. You know, I suppose. Yeah.
You're like walking on eggshells there because you don't know if you don't. You could do something wrong. They could be testing you. You could fail the test they were putting on you. Like it's really difficult mentally being there. It's pretty harder mentally than it is physically in a way, because it's like a bit of a game you got to play, which I didn't play very well, I guess.
It's all politics, so I'm sure it's riddled with it up there. You got to play the game.
I think that's just business. I'm not saying that's WWE. I think that's any business. You know, in any line of work, that's the way it is. You know, a lot of it's about making connections, and I probably didn't make the connections I needed to make, and that probably stems from just not being a loud person. You know, and obviously, I don't want to tarnish all Americans with the same brush, but there's a lot of Americans that are quite loud and they are quite outgoing people, and they'll sort of be chanting the trainer's name when they walk in the room, and you know, it just doesn't. Me being an English person, it's just not. I don't think any English people do that. You know, it's just not what we do. I think we're known for just being miserable, but they read it the wrong way. In their head, they think you're miserable, you don't want to be there, but it's not. That isn't the case. It's just you like to watch what's going on rather than you haven't got to be the centre of attention.
No. It brings me on to another point, I suppose, as well, is there seems to have been a resurgence, particularly in the last few years, for, you know, British stars really making it. I mean, you look at Nick Aldis as the NWA champion, you got Will Ospreay now as the New Japan champion, and what Drew McIntyre and Sheamus, for example, have done over there. In your opinion, what is it more sort of that culture that we bring that it may have kept British guys down from positions like that before, or what's your opinion on why it's taken so long, really, for British wrestlers to break through? I don't
know. I think maybe where they're like American or Japanese companies, they're obviously going to try and look for American or Japanese guys to be their headliners to start with. It's kind of a patriotic thing, I guess. It just takes a while for us to break that cliche. But I think British wrestlers are so good that at some point they got to notice us. You know, and that's happened now.
Yeah. And
those people that you mentioned there are top of their game in what they do. You know, there's no one better. So that's why they are where they are. I don't.
Have you seen a difference?
I think Will Ospreay's, there's no one like him. You know, so they want that kind of champion, and there's no one else they can pick. And the same with Drew. Like Drew's hands down probably the best heavyweight in the world. So if you're going to put a heavyweight championship on someone, it's got to be Drew, whether he's Scottish or not. It's just he is the best.
Yeah. Do you feel that there is, in what you've seen over your years, sort of when you started off in the UK to where it is now, there's been that much of a noticeable difference in the industry over here? Or is it just the fact that it's become more mainstream to people like myself being able to see it? More avenues?
Yeah, it changed a lot. Even when I came back from America, like when I left to go to the States to when I came back, it just changed completely. And it's probably your companies like Progress and then what Rev Pro were doing and stuff. Just, I think with the whole social media and sort of videos going online a lot more now, probably helps a lot as well. I remember when I started wrestling, it was tape traders and VHS tapes of some American indies. You know, like you couldn't watch it online. And then when I came back, everything's on these like Pivot Share or On Demand or something. You can see it all then pretty easy. You know, so that's helped expose British wrestling, which is really good. And it's got more eyes on it.
Yeah. And then obviously NXT branching out over here. Everyone, I think, has got almost like something to aim for now, and the WWE doesn't seem like that far away.
It couldn't be better. Yeah, it couldn't be better. I mean, when I went out there, it was rare to anyone to get signed. You know, it was really unlikely to get signed. And so it was kind of like really hard to get there. But now you think how many people there are at NXT UK, and that's going to be a revolving door. Like they're going to want new people. Yeah. That's what they do. That's how their company works. Is they bring you in. If you don't produce, they get rid of you, get someone else, and they just keep trying until they find a Stone Cold or a Rock or something. You know, that's what they're searching for.
Might seem a bit of a random connection, but this just kind of gone off in my head because of subjects that I've discussed previously. How much do you think the fall of WCW and that competition no longer being there for the WWE changed how they worked? Because it always used to be, like you said, more difficult to get in there. And people say nowadays that the reason WWE are trying some of the things they do is because they don't really need the fans' opinions don't really matter like they used to, because there's no one else touching them anyway.
Yeah.
Do you feel that was a big turning point sort of back then when that happened?
Yeah, it's bad for business. I think they need to have competition. Everyone's better when you've got competition against you. So when you've got no competition, you're just going to get a bit stale and you're not going to keep improving and changing. So I think, but then I think like anyone of my age is going to look back and enjoy the 90s wrestling more than 2010. I thought, it doesn't interest me, that stuff. But, it definitely affected it. In terms of getting out there to a big company and being British, it was harder because you only had one company. Yeah. Some of the other British guys that went out for WCW and stuff, so there was more options in those days. But
they seem to be a bit more open to it. And,
so hopefully this AEW can, produce something and get up there and be competition from.
I know, TNA Impact tried it. I mean, Impact's still going. I know it's, but I think back in the day when the early days of TNA, when Jeff Jarrett was there, they were really hoping. I was hoping that could be the new WCW.
You're hoping, but they just seem to be just throwing money at things rather than producing good content. They were just chucking, who can we sign next? Who can we sign next? So hopefully AEW don't do that, and they just, which they don't seem to be. They seem to be producing a good show, which is what's going to matter.
Yeah. So touching on Jeff Jarrett, then going back to the common kind of what tied me to you, I suppose, is when Jeff Jarrett brought Global Force over here. Do you remember how you got involved in that?
I think Nick dropped me a message and just said, "Would I be free to work this date?" And then just went along and worked the show. But
was it just that one that you did on that tour?
Just the one, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think because I'm a Devon boy, because I'm a hometown boy, it was like I think he was trying to wrestle someone. He had like 3 shows in England, so he was wrestling a hometown person on each show. So when he came down to Devon or the Southwest, it was we'll get a job because he's down that way.
Yeah. Like I got a good feeling at that show that Global Force, it felt, I'd seen like again like an independent show down here, but that really felt like it was something special because there were guys there like yourself and Jarrett and Nick Aldis and that, and it was a great way for someone like me to get to see.
It's great for me. Yeah, it's great for me. Like to get in there with Nick, and learn stuff from him, and then to be backstage with people like Jeff Jarrett, so you can pick their brains and ask them and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
What should I do differently? I mean, that's what you want as a wrestler. Is those kind of people around you, people that are better than you, so you can ask them for their advice and they can help elevate you. So it's great for me. It's great, to go and do. My mate Yestin worked Jeff Jarrett.
He did, yeah.
Great for him. Like,
real
cool person to work. So.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you're around? Because obviously you're still active, which we'll come touch on in a minute. Is there anyone in the UK, as you're doing the circuits now, that you still find you go to, I don't know, for advice or validation or anything like that, or are you now passing that on, your knowledge on to others that are coming up?
I try and just learn from everybody. Like this, everyone can show you something or teach you something, because wrestling, there's no right and wrong way to wrestle. So you take people's opinions on board, because they might see something differently to you. So I just try and ask everyone for their advice. the main guy for me is a guy called James Mason, and James is like just the best. It's like I always make a big effort to. He does the rings for Brian, and I'll always be there straight away doing the ring for him and taking it down and trying to do whatever I can to help him. And then in turn, he kind of helps me, and he'll give me honest advice on my matches. But
cool.
Yeah, anyone really. I mean, I always try and, if I ever get like a Johnny Kidd or a Steve Gray, I quite often at the shows, or any of these sort of old British wrestlers, because that's the style that I really love. So I'm always going to pester them for advice or tips or little tricks and reversals they can show me. And when I go to Japan and stuff, they want me to do a British style, so I always try and take stuff from people like Johnny Kidd, and I'll be like, can you show me a wrist lock reversal that people don't know or they've forgotten? He showed me something, and I can take that to Japan, and that's the best thing for them. And I can do that all tour in every town, this one reversal, but it'll get a good reaction. So
I bet they love that as well. They can still pass on their tricks and their knowledge. These days
it's something that's missing a bit with wrestling now. When I started, you just asked everyone for advice because that's how you got better. And now, there was obviously a lot of boys do still ask for advice, but sometimes I think maybe they could ask more and ask more people their opinions because it's the only way to get better. If you think you know it all, then you're just wasting your time. You want to keep learning and keep improving.
Sure.
And always ask people, if there's somewhere you want to be and they've been to that place, then find out what they do, because if they must be doing something right because they got there. So.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, cracking. Yeah. So just after your or sort of a few years after you left WWE NXT, you spent some time, like you mentioned, that in Japan for All Japan. What was your time out there like? Because I'm always intrigued speaking to people, because when I was growing up, I didn't know a lot about the Japanese wrestling except what I saw in Eurosport, and it was at the time completely different to like the comic book stuff happening over in the States and that. But yeah, what was it like for you being out there?
That's the best place I've ever wrestled. Just love the culture, like the people, and it's just, for me, it's love it. Like, they're so disciplined, and there's no trouble, there's no problems. The locker room is very quiet, and it's like a real sport. They treat it like a real sport. There's a lot of respect for you as a professional wrestler when you go there. And I really like that. And you might get like 3 other foreigners that are with me, so there'll be like 4 of us, and you kind of stick like a little bubble, because most Japanese guys don't speak any English, and my Japanese is very, very, very limited. So it's kind of like a tight little group of us, and we look after each other and find the local gyms, and it's just really good fun.
Cool.
It's like a different world. You go to America, it's like England's with the volume turned up, and then when you go to Japan, it's like completely foreign lands. Everything's different. The food's completely different. Culture's different. But I really like it.
You could probably see why so many the American names spent so long out there, rather than when they could have been back in America doing shows for WCW or whatever. They prefer to stay out there.
It's a great place to learn too. It's just amazing culture. It's hard. It's really hard work, and I'm lucky that with All Star and stuff, I get to do tours that are everyday wrestling. So I'm kind of used to that schedule of wrestling every day. I think some people go to Japan, and then in Japan, it's a full on schedule, and they get burnt out. I'm kind of lucky in a good way that I've been brought up in that British wrestling sort of circuit where we do a lot of shows, so I can get used to pacing myself and saving myself a little bit for the certain matches, and my conditioning's at a level where it can keep going. But it's a really good place to go. Every young wrestler should be trying to get out there and do a bit of doing a bit there. I just think now with I'm 34, so with wrestling it's about experiences, and there's not many jobs where you can go to Japan and they fly you out there and put you in hotels and go all over the country and you get paid. It's insane. I just think I can make money doing this wrestling and see all these different countries. It's crazy.
Did you envisage that right back at the beginning? It's probably a daft question to ask, because it must be a dream for every wrestler. But did you ever think that you'd get to that point?
No, not when you're a farm boy in Devon. No. You just think I'm going to run the farm or something. I'm going to be in this mud all my life. So you can't. It's crazy to think.
What did your family think when you first told them that you wanted to get into it? Did they kind of try to brush it aside, or were they supportive?
No, I'm really lucky. I've got really, really good parents, and they're supportive in whatever I want to do. That kind of people. But my dad is a big rugby fan. He played a lot of rugby too. So I think when I stopped playing rugby, I imagine he would have liked me to have kept playing. I think the wrestling, they just didn't understand it. They're obviously not wrestling fans, so they got no idea really what it was. And my first show was my second match was in Crediton Town Hall, and I took them along to it. I'm like a fat little 16-year-old kid. And we do an injury angle where I take a pile driver and meant to break my neck, and I can't be in a 6-man main event. But
right,
I guess my selling back then was pretty good because my mum believed it completely and started ringing the ambulance, trying to break into the changing rooms. They had to stop her from calling the ambulance. So they didn't like that. But I mean,
that's when you know you've done it right.
Yeah, I worked for Noah in 2008. 2009 maybe, Coventry Skydome. So that's a lot of people. It's like 3,000 or 4,000 people. And I got them some tickets to come and watch that in Coventry. And I think they've told me before that when they sat there and watched that, and it was me and Naoki in the opener, sort of 20-minute draw, and they were like, okay, yeah, no, this is all right. You know what you're doing out there, and we're kind of going to get behind you. But then, obviously, being able to, probably the best memory of my wrestling career was calling my dad when I got signed to a contract with America, and sort of in the O2 in London, just give them a call on the phone and say, right, they offered me a contract. It was good money, and that's like a real good memory for me because it's not in any way a sort of up yours to my parents because they're great parents. It's just kind of me just validating the fact that I'd done all these sort of stupid drives to all these different towns in England and been back in the middle of the night, and my body was pretty messed up, I guess, from wrestling already, and it was just showing them that it was worth it, and I was quite good at this, and I could get somewhere.
That's brilliant. Oh, brilliant. No.
And they're supportive, but it's just, the injuries and stuff like that I worry about, and like my memories, it may not be from wrestling, but, I don't remember a lot of my early childhood and stuff. And I can't, there's a lot of things my parents will ask me about family holidays. I really can't remember any of that stuff. I try, but, I know I've had a few concussions and there's a lot of sort of hard hits that I've taken and stuff. And that sort of worries me a little bit, and that's the hard bit, I think, with like I've got a kid, like it's difficult, to see your kid sort of taking that kind of impact and stuff, and be supportive is quite hard, but they know I'm happy and I enjoy it. And when I send them a picture of some cherry blossom tree to my mum from Japan, it's quite cool. Like they appreciate that, that I've had all these opportunities.
They're seeing the world through your eyes, really. I know it's cliche, but
they're parents, and they're just they all what parents are like. They worry about where you're going to be in 10 years, not doing now.
I suppose the good thing is in this day and age, there's a lot more awareness of the injury, particularly head injuries, things like that, the things that can happen to you as a wrestler. Whereas back before, 70s, 80s, even the 90s, you just kind of did loads of crazy stuff without really knowing what was going to happen.
Oh, sure. But even now, like in England, and I wrestle with some people, and it might be a little village hall somewhere, and there's 60 people in the crowd, and they want to do some move off the top rope to the floor or something, and you kind of go in, and it's not being lazy. People might think it's lazy, but it's not. And you just go, I really don't want to take anything unnecessary because, I want to play football with my kid, when I'm older. I don't want to be hobbling around on crutches. And you just got to pick your time to do certain things and be a little bit smart with what you're doing in the ring. Because it doesn't take much in that wrestling ring, and you can be in big trouble. One bad landing and you're in big trouble. So you've got to be a little bit careful what you're doing.
Yeah, especially like you say, any show. Even if it's a village hall or stadium.
But that comes with the gym, like just a lot of maybe guys nowadays aren't training like they should be doing, because you haven't got to train like a bodybuilder, but you need to be physically fit and you need to be agile and flexible, and you need to have a strong neck and things. It's all important stuff to have, because you've got to just think about the future and making sure your health's still there in the future.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the present and the future then. So what are you up to now? Obviously, like I say, you're still active in the ring. I mean, are you looking? Have you been able to do any shows? Have you done any kind of shows with very few or no fans, or is this going to be the first point for you to go back out and perform in front of people?
I've done quite a lot of shows for Rev Pro with Epic Encounter stuff. There's no audience, just in the warehouse down there. So I've done a few of those. I did a show out in Malta again with no crowds. It was back in last September or something. So one of my friends from All Japan runs a company in Malta anyway, so he always brings me out there, which is very nice because it's like a nice little 5 days. He puts me in the beach house, so I'm outside.
Very nice.
You can't fault it really.
No.
So I did that, and I did a tour for Butlins for NGW last October, which was all sort of very social distance and COVID tests and bubbles and stuff, and that was really cool because I was in front of the crowd, so to get that in front of the crowd was good. So I have been pretty active. I run a wrestling school in Salisbury too, so I've been able to get on the mats with the boys here, and we've been practicing some stuff and doing a lot of conditioning. I teach at Rev Pro in Portsmouth, teach their wrestling club down there too. So I've been in a ring, but I can't wait to get back at it. My first show is at the end of the month for Haven Holiday Parks for All Star. Then through June, every Saturday and Sunday we're booked up with shows for All Star, and it's looking good. I don't know if I'm going to get abroad much this year with the COVID, but definitely for England, there's a lot of shows coming up.
That's brilliant.
We'll see what happens.
Feel free.
Everyone's dying to get out there and get back at it, but this is the time. Like I tell the boys that I teach, they're all active wrestlers. I don't have any beginners. They're all people that are wrestling on shows already, and they just come here and do conditioning for an hour sort of mat wrestling. And the conditioning we do is brutal, and you just got to shout at them. No one else is working this hard, so no one else is doing this. Let's come back and be the best. This is the opportunity now, where people haven't wrestled for a year. Where maybe if you weren't top of the pack, this is your chance now to just leapfrog people, because there's a lot of people that would have been taking it easy for a year and not really bothering. So if you can put the work in now and come back better than them, you can jump up the queue. So
I think
hopefully.
I was going to say, feel free, give a plug for any of the shows that you've got coming up, because I got people all over the country listen to this, so you never know, you may be landing in someone's hometown or close to them and then get out to see you.
I would need the diary. I don't know.
That's always a good sign. That's always a good sign. All over the
place. I'll be at Rev Pro shows that are coming up. I think they've got a tag team coming up, so I'll be there. I'm not going to be at the Reach shows in July. I'm busy, but the next shows after that, I'll be back at Reach down in Plymouth. So if you're in Devon and you want to watch good wrestling, go down to there. And then I'm full time for All Star. So any All Star show you see, town show, good chance I'm going to be there. And they're the best. So if you want to come watch a good pro wrestling show, then come watch All Star Wrestling. You can't go wrong. So.
There you go. Thank you for that. Ideal. I'll definitely keep an eye out next time you're down here. You should definitely come down to the ring shows. I think you'd really enjoy it. It's good. Yeah, you'll see some people that you probably haven't seen wrestle before, and I think you'll be really surprised with how good they are. It's a really good company, and they run it really well, and the shows are great. And I can't say enough good stuff about them. So I'll really encourage you to attend them. Just very quickly, what is it like in the shows where you've done the matches that you've done without a crowd? Is it any different for you, or
it's brutal? I just see it as training. I just think it's just a cardio session. It beats a treadmill. I'd rather do that than run on a treadmill. So it's a sweat session, but it's brutal. I love wrestling, but without an audience, things hurt a lot more. When you got the crowd, and the crowd are getting up and they're getting hot, and you can really. I know it sounds silly, and all the wrestlers are saying it's hard to realise unless you do it, but you really can feed off that energy. If the crowd are really into a match, things are they don't hurt, and it's just so much fun. So without that interaction with the crowd, it is like a training match, But it's good to be in the ring. It's good to be current and be active. So it's all good.
Brilliant. I've got a couple of final questions. This is kind of just almost just having a little bit of fun in a way. The first one, I only realised when I was preparing for this, or when I was flicking through social media earlier on, when this goes out, which will be on Wednesday, that date will actually be the 25-year anniversary of the curtain call incident in Madison Square Garden. What's your take on that? Just very quickly, your opinion on that. People talk about that incident as being pivotal for sending for whatever happened after that in the wrestling industry, and really shaping it for like the last 20 years or so. What is your opinion? Was it as big a deal as people make out? I think
it would have been unprofessional. I think that is an unprofessional thing to do. I think for me, when you're a wrestler, it's you're working for the promoter. It's like any job, It doesn't matter where you work. You've got a boss normally, and
Yeah.
you're working for your boss. If your boss tells you to do something, you do it. You don't do the opposite, you know. And if your boss says don't go out there and celebrate his mates in the ring, you don't go out there and celebrate his mates in the ring. It's just the guy that's paying your wage. So I think it'd be. I don't think anyone could say it wasn't unprofessional. You know, it's not a good thing to do.
No.
I don't know. I'm not a fan of the social media stuff, and I don't, you know, like Instagram, for example. I should use it more, but I just think like I don't want to know what John Cena's eating for breakfast. You know, like I want to see him wrestle on the TV. I don't need to see what when he's having a bath. Like it doesn't, you know what I mean? It's just it's just weird to me.
Yeah,
it's true, isn't it? You know,
it breaks down that again. What they did that night, I suppose, just break down that wall, doesn't it? Between I think when people like, you know, back in the 80s or something, you didn't want to see Sylvester Stallone pissed up in a bar. You wanted to see Rocky Balboa in the movies. So like, you know, it kills the magic a little bit. It does.
I think it's kind of affected it in a good way sometimes, and then in a negative way a lot as well. Sort of social media. But it's a shame, but it is.
It shapes everything these days, unfortunately, doesn't it? You can't move without something being documented. Yeah. But,
completely, and sometimes it's good, you know, that speaking out stuff that happens was good, you know, to let people know what's been going on and get rid of some people. But at the same time, sometimes there's a lot of opinions shared that maybe aren't that valid, you know. So you kind of got to take everything with a pinch of salt, really, until it's it's proven.
Everyone's got an opinion, not always the right one, but they'll always get airtime if they've got their finger on the button, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of wrestlers sort of really pander towards it too. It's unusual to me. It's a bit odd, you know, kind of just be a good person and be a good wrestler. You don't need to pander too much on social media all the time. Like,
no.
But, you know.
There you go. Final
question. My goal when I wrestled was to be kind of respected by the boys. You know, I always thought, I'd love to have the boys think that he's a good wrestler, you know, whether the crowd thought you were good, you know, obviously you want that because you want to get booked again, but you kind of wanted people in the changing room to say, he's decent, you know, he's a good wrestler. And I remember me and James Mason in the car once, we were driving back from a show, and I sort of said to James, like, I love the fact that people think I'm a good wrestler, but my bank account isn't changing, you know, it's not showing in my bank. And James said exactly the same thing to me when I feel exactly the same way. And everyone sees James as the best wrestler in Europe, but he was scratching to make a living. And you think it's weird how social media works, you know, like you can be really good, but if you're not active on that social media, you're not on shows that have that attention with social media, you don't get to the other big companies. And
which again is changing the face of even, you know, this industry, I think, because you wouldn't have thought 10 years ago that it would play such a part in anything. But
100%. I went to All Japan, the first tour I did there, people were like saying that Joel Redman hadn't wrestled for 4 years since his NXT run. I was like, well, I've been doing 200 plus shows a year for All Star, but there's no internet exposure. They're not on the internet, so no one knows about it. So in these fans' eyes, I hadn't wrestled for 4 years. I've just been sat at home.
It's amazing. And
it's crazy, you know.
They think then that exactly. They know so many what they call them, like armchair quarterbacks, do they call them, or something? Basically, people that just view stuff, I think they know everything about it. And
for sure.
Right, one final question. I like to do this with some of the guests. Actually, it's along the same kind of lines, but I'm always intrigued by the answers that come out. So, you've graced the ring. You've been near the WWE personally. If you were given the chance to have one match at a WrestleMania, any era, past, present, in the future, whatever, who would you have wanted to face if you had just that one chance?
From a wrestling standpoint, it'd be Benoit, you know, obviously, because that's who I looked up to when I was a kid. Whether I could hang with him, I don't know. He'd kill me, you know, he'd blow me up straight away. But it'd been amazing to have been able to get in a ring with him. Yeah. But I guess, you know, as a fan, you could be The Rock. I think, like, The Rock in his prime. To be able to stand the other side of the ring would have been pretty surreal, wouldn't it? I imagine you can imagine the goosebumps if you're standing opposite the ring to The Rock. So I think that would probably be the one, wouldn't it?
Well, just out of interest, what year would that be if you had to put The Rock at his peak that you would have wanted to be in the ring with him? Sort of what
I reckon like late 2000s, maybe.
Okay.
2001, that sort of era.
Yeah.
Probably around that time.
Brilliant.
But I liked it when he came back as a villain, you know. I thought it was better when he came back as a Hollywood's Rock.
Yeah.
I remember that he did a match with Hogan at No Way Out or something, was it? And did the WrestleMania match, and they did a rematch next year on No Way Out.
And with
I just remember that entrance, insane. Yeah, and he comes out and the boos in the arena was crazy. The amount of heat he had, that was really cool.
Even though that angle, that kind of character had already been done to death with Hollywood Hogan, it just shows how much he pulled off anything that he did, any angle they wanted to give him. He could make people believe in it. So yeah, good call.
He's just a different level. Some of those guys, the work ethic and stuff, is just a different level.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan for reading the books. I love reading autobiographies, and
The
Rock's a particularly good one. But even if you read that, his work ethic was insane. Like, he just worked so hard to be the best.
And it shows, because he's still, I know a lot of them have dabbled in Hollywood and that, and people would argue that his films aren't that great. I think he's done really well. Because
I think he's a good actor.
Yeah, I quite like watching them. Even my missus rolls her eyes at some before, but then we sat down and watched them. Actually,
everyone knows who he is, don't they? Like, there's no one in the world who doesn't know who he is. Like, it's unbelievable. It's great that he's still there with wrestling. He's not sort of turning his back on wrestling and being ashamed by it. He's really supportive of it, and he does come back every now and again and stuff. So that's really good.
At the end of the day, that's what got him there. Regardless of where he is now. Yeah,
he respects that, which is really cool.
Yeah. Listen, Joel, this has been amazing, mate. Thank you so much for spending time with us on this Sunday evening, or Wednesday by the time this goes out. But no, all the best with everything you've got coming up. It's great that you're still, you're still so busy, and I will definitely be catching you next time you're down this way. A bit of a hotel crowd.
Like I say, come along to a Reach show, and we can meet in person, and
that'd be cool.
Have a chat with a few of the boys there and stuff, and it'd be good to get you involved with the company a bit or something.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, anything like that. Awesome. Okay, mate. Ideal. Ladies and gentlemen, Joel Redman, thank you so much again, mate.
No problems.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle to keep updated about all future shows.